So I'm all ready to make this pond as good as possible. Got my Aqua L hat on. I've got my well-used red sea thong. So this is a potentially absolutely beautiful pond. Now, you can see that it's all green. And what we need to recognise is that there is a war going on in this pond, which is algae versus good bacteria. If the good bacteria is winning, this water will be crystal clear. If the algae is winning, this water will be green. Now, the fish in general are fine either way, because at the end of the day, the fish produce a nutrient source after being fed, and then that nutrient either feeds the algae or it feeds the good bacteria. So there are various things that we need to be aware of in order to ensure that we're feeding the good bacteria and we're not feeding the algae. So we've just done a little bit of a strip test. Basically these things, let's say these things are better than nothing, but basically what this is saying is there's little to no nitrite or nitrate. The pH is okay, but probably a tiny bit on the low side. The KH is low, but still present. GH is low, but still present. So there's nothing here that concerns me too much. Basically, what we're talking about today is algae versus good bacteria. So, right now, as far as I can test, and as far as I can see, we have some very healthy, happy fish swimming around here. Now, how do we make the water clear? So basically, the first thing we need to do is understand the bacteria and the bacteria's requirements, and understand the algae and the algae's requirements. So, let's have a little look at it. So what's going on here is this big black thing is just a pre-filter, and at the moment it's being used as a biological filter. Now, in order for us to use this as a biological filter, we would want to make sure that it's cleaned using water from the pond, not water from the tap. That way, at least we're growing some good bacteria, at least it is somewhat of a compost heap. Now, we've got a pump here. Now, inside this pump is an impeller, so every year or so it's good to pull the impeller out and give it a bit of a clean. But what we need to be aware of is that it's not really a filter. So, we've got to consider where is the good bacteria going to grow? And how do we add a UV sterilizer? Because when we have energy from the sun and we have nutrients from the fish, we're creating an environment that the algae just loves. The other thing the algae really loves is CO2. So the fact that this is going down here and going off is wonderful because that will beautifully aerate the water. But in saying that, you've got all these fish that are going to lower the CO2 level, and CO2 is another very important thing for the algae. So the more we can oxygenate the water, the less desirable the water is for the CO2. So if we can, at a minimum, look at replacing that pump or leaving that pump there and adding like a little fountain pump. And Aqua L has got a really good all-in-one filter. Let's say a 6,000 is around the $500 mark. But what that's going to bring for us is a UV sterilizer. And a UV sterilizer is going to kill off the algae and then allow the bacteria an opportunity to grow. But in saying that, the good bacteria needs to be able to grow somewhere. So if we can't install an external filter, what we could consider doing is increasing the biological capacity of the water. And we can do that by several ways. By increasing the filtration, we could also look at where that sponge was. We could put a T-section and put 2 sponges. And the Aqua L internal UV filter will also have biological media. So we need more biological media. And the best biological media is a media called Marine Pure, which are these little white balls. And they work like a compost heap, and they grow parallel nitrifying and denitrifying bacteria in them. So we can either just throw them in the bottom of the pond, or I might just wander up here and figure out if there's somewhere up there that I can put the biological media. What a cool little place to relax. So this is where the water comes out. It's also relatively important that we keep this area clean, because what we don't want is too much crap building up in this area that may cause the little spillway to overflow. Oh, good. Yep. Okay, so there's one coming out over there. Yep. And then there's one that's starting up here. So this area here may be a fairly ideal place to put our Marine Pure. So the Marine Pure is going to look like little round balls. So let's just see how this flows. But if we were able to modify this area in order to put a whole bunch of balls here, that may very well work. I could even get a Marine Pure block to put across there that could act as a little bit of a barricade. And then I could stack this area up with Marine Pure. And basically, as long as the water's going through it, it would work quite efficiently. Failing this, we would just put the Marine Pure in the bottom of the pond, particularly in proximity to the filter. Otherwise, we could even think about a gravel tray filter for this pond as well. But the aim is to get good bacteria into this pond. And to get good bacteria into this pond, we need nitrifying and denitrifying bacteria. So the Marine Pure is absolutely perfect. So if the more Marine Pure we put in, the more bacteria we're able to grow. Because the nitrifying bacteria will grow on the external surface of the Marine Pure, and due to the particular porosity and void space within the Marine Pure, the denitrifying bacteria will grow within the media, and that's a fairly holistic biomedium, and it's definitely the best on the market, and you buy it once and you typically don't have to replace it. Then when we get a good bacteria established in the Marine Pure, that's when our algae starts to lose, especially with the introduction of a UV to kill off the algae in the water. Living in this beautiful spot one reality is birds. So, as experienced with this pond, you can go for long periods of time and have no issues with birds, and then suddenly you do. And you find that the birds tend to go for a certain size fish. So if the fish are too big, they don't tend to go for them. If they're too small, they don't tend to go for them. But there does seem to be a sweet spot depending on the species of the bird. So if you do believe that your birds are the problem, then you've got a few options. One is you can get I think they're called like a balcony guard or something. And basically it's just a little device that you could actually plug in, and then you can set it for a range, and it actually has a little sensor on it, and it releases this high-pitched sound that you can't hear that makes the birds go away. Now, if you've got lorikeets and beautiful birds in your garden and you don't want to scare the birds away, maybe this isn't what you want. If you don't worry that the birds are not going to be in this vicinity, then maybe it's a good idea. So that's one option. But the other option is to get some fishing line and tie it from there to there, to there, to there, to there, to there, to there. And then often the birds can't see the fishing line, so they come bombing down to get the fish. Then they get snagged on the fishing line, they end up going into the drink, and then they fly off, and it freaks the hell out of them. And then quite often, if that bird no longer hunts the fish because it was freaked out by what happened, then you've solved the problem. So something as simple as fishing line can be good for protecting your fish. Otherwise, whatever you're doing to try and distract its sight can help too. So things like your fountains or something to break up the top so they don't get to focus on it. Some lilies or fake lilies, or, you know, you can just try various things. Other people do things like, for example, they'll put a fake owl. Sometimes that works. Oh, well, that bird didn't care. Yeah, that bird outsmarted you, but that can work. So fish keeping is 50% water quality, which we can monitor for you. What we ask you to do, if you're worried about your water quality, is grab your phone, make a good video so we can see what's going on with the pond, but we also want to see all your other bits and pieces. We want to see your fish food, your water age, and any other chemicals you've got, and then you bring us down a water sample, and we can put it through our spin test machine, and we can find out if there's any advice that we have for you to improve your water quality, and that's easy enough. So fish keeping is 50% water quality and 50% food quality. So, number one, what are we looking for with fish food? The first thing we're looking for is actual fish food. So let's say this product, for example. This has got fish meal. Fish meal is just all the crap that has not been used. So fish meal is not a good thing. Then shrimp meal. That's not good too, because that's just the crap from the shrimp that has not been used. Offcuts. Then wheat germ. Fish don't eat wheat germ. Fish don't eat wheat flour. Fish don't eat soybeans or yeast. Artificial vitamins. So this here is just chemicals, terrestrial nutrients, and byproducts. So this is not actually fish food. If it was up to me, I would be looking for a high quality fish food. My favourite fish foods is Spectrum's probiotics. Number one is it's all aquatic ingredients. It's set at the ratio of fish absorption, and it's cold extruded, it's not pressure cooked and processed, and it's got a probiotic bacteria in the food, which means when the fish poo, the bacteria in the poo physically eats the poo. So Spectrum's probiotics is one of my favourite foods. The other food I love is Danichi Colour. Danichi Colour is a holistic, slow cooked food. And as far as just fish results are concerned, I don't think you can beat Danichi. And as far as clean is concerned, I don't think you can beat probiotics. So I tend to use both of them, and they would be my favourite food. So what to feed is one question, how much to feed is the next question. Now, the thing that tells you more than anything else how much to feed is the actual fish. Now, looking at these fish, I'm very happy with their weight. They are not thin and they're not fat. So if you look at the gills of the fish, and then you've got a little bit of a belly, and then it goes down towards the tail, then I'm very happy. Looking at these fish, they look very well fed. So they're not fat and they're not thin. So, during summer, most people tend to feed their pond 3 to 5 times a week. And the way they tend to feed their fish is you'll just put a bit of food in, and you want it all gone in 30 seconds. So if you're consistently doing the same thing, and you notice the fish getting thin, as an average fish, remembering that there's almost always a fat one and there's almost always a skinny one, and that's not what I'm talking about. If your average fish is a bit fat, then whatever you're doing, you need to do a little bit less. And if your average fish are a bit thin, then whatever you're doing, you need to do a little bit more. But knowing what a healthy fish is very important. The other thing is that a lot of people don't realise how little a fish actually needs to be fed. If you're feeding good quality foods, you don't need to feed much of it. And fish can go like a month, 2 months, and not even actually lose weight. So if you're going away, quite often the worst thing to do is get your friends to feed the fish, because they so often overfeed them. Whereas if you just go away and don't feed them, most of the time you come back, and actually the pond's cleaner than ever, and the fish haven't even lost any weight. So the fish tell you how much they need feeding by their weight. So if you're noticing they're a little bit thin, then you want to feed a tiny little bit more and give it a couple of months to show up. If they're a bit fat, we want to feed them a tiny little bit less and give them months to show up. We're not looking for any sort of results anytime soon. Everything with biology needs to be patient and slow. We plant the seed and then we wait for the seedling to grow. So you've just got to be a little bit conscious whenever you're seeing fish with these little growths on them, because that can be a herpes virus. Now, herpes virus in general, they don't really cause the fish that much trouble, but you just need to be aware that if you're introducing other fish to a fish with herpes virus, that you are actually exposing their new fish to the herpes virus. So that's just something to be aware of. One of the absolute best things you can do is add a little bit of salt. Now, if you put 1 part per thousand salt, which usually works out as about 1 gram per litre of either DH salt or pure salt, it is absolutely amazing for the fish's body slime and immune system. But if you let your salt level get too high, then your plants don't appreciate it. But if you don't have plants, then the algae won't appreciate it, because you will decrease the amount of algae by increasing the amount of salt. Obviously, that needs to be done with a little bit of monitoring, because we don't want to go too far. Goldfish very happily live between 3 and 5 parts per thousand, and the algae would hate it, and your plants would hate it. If you go for 1 part per thousand or lower, it's really good for the fish, and then there'll be no adverse reaction on any plants that may be in the pond. So upping the salt might be a really great idea. In the resurrection of this pond, I would like to see some marine pure added. So if we get some of these pebbles and create a little bit of a barricade across there, and then we put our marine pure, so the water's going to come go through the marine pure, that's one option. We'll see how that goes. If that fails, or if it doesn't capacitate the amount of the balls, then we just go and put the balls around the filter, because they still work in there. So they just work like a compost heap. So increasing the amount of place for the good bacteria to live is really important. Then we put the UV in. Now, usually we put the UV filter in and we let that run for a while before we turn the actual UV on, because we want the good bacteria establishing in the filter. It's really important that none of our filters are washed with tap water. They want to be washed in water from the pond, so the chlorine's not killing the good bacteria. Now, whenever you're putting new water in, you're putting in water age, right? Yeah. Good. And then we just need to be making sure that we're cleaning the filters in water from the fish tank, not water from the tap, and also being aware that every single filter will have an impeller. So every now and then we want to peel the impeller out, give the impeller a clean the housing. Now, once we've had the UV running in here and we've got the extra media running in here, over time, not quickly, but over time, this water's going to clear up. And then we can then get a good visual of what's going on at the bottom. Because it's very possible there's a whole lot of crap on the bottom. So we could bring our big fancy vacuum and potentially suck it all out. Otherwise, you can just get yourself like a fine net and scoop it all out. And even just getting yourself like a nice, you go to Bunnings, you can get a pool net pretty cheap. And if you regularly pull all the leaves and stuff out.
Then I can see that I go in and I take all the leaves out.
Excellent.
But I haven't.
So the more regularly you take the leaves out, the better. And there's also products like Pristine. So there's good bacteria products that help to give out good bacteria, so the algae loses to the bacteria. So Stability is probably my favourite. Stability from Seachem. It's a really good bacteria product, and it gives good bacteria to help beat the algae. But then there's another product by Seachem that works with the Stability, and that's called Pristine. Now, Pristine is not bacteria for the water quality, it's more bacteria for the sludge. So it's more of like a mud bacteria, and it goes in and eats all the sludge away. So I'm imagining that on the bottom of this pond, there's probably a whole heap of sludge. So if we put some Pristine in, the Pristine is able to go in and eat away a lot of the sludge. So that may very well be our friend. So those two products I absolutely love, and they may really help this pond. When we install the extra filter, we could do it with like a fountain head, which actually might be pretty good for detracting birds if that was a problem. Otherwise, I would be tempted to use the filter for what's called kinetic energy. Now, what kinetic energy is where you use the movement of the water to create the movement of the water. So if we just look for the nicest place to bring the cord down, that's something we need to be aware of. And then if we can hide the filter somewhere, potentially under here, so when it blows, what we want to do is make the water move, so the movement of the water is creating the movement of the water. So if we get to the point where it's getting this movement, then instead of all the sediment settling on the bottom, because of the movement of the water, the sediment will tend to stay in solution much better. Therefore, it's more likely to go in the filter where you can deal with it. So I'd be very interested in running some Pristine for a while, then looking at getting the vacuum and sucking out whatever crap's on the bottom. And I think it would be fairly easy to convert this pond into an absolutely beautiful feature. Now, the enemy of ponds is trees, residual trees. So the more we can try to protect our pond from trees falling in, or from leaf litter and so forth, because the leaf litter all goes in there and starts decomposing, and all of that will have a negative impact on our water quality. So whatever we can do to trim trees and try to make sure that we're not getting leaves into the pond, any action we can take to reduce leaves is definitely in our favour. What I want to just discuss briefly is if this is on a timer, which this one is, it is a major disadvantage, because then what happens is the fish are constantly producing CO2 and consuming oxygen, and then you've got this waterfall during the daytime, which is going to raise your oxygen level, help raise the pH, raise the redox potential. Then at night time, all this turns off, and then suddenly your redox potential is dropping, your dissolved oxygen level is dropping, and potentially your pH is dropping. So the off and on business is really a disadvantage. So what we're going to look at doing with this pond is come back and install the filter. Hopefully we're then going to have some good kinetic energy. We're going to have some good gas exchange on the surface. Because what happens with a pond is that when there's no filters running, then you get what's called high surface tension. So then your surface goes full flat, and the gas actually can't exchange. So therefore you've got all these fish in here that are affecting the gas within the water, therefore lowering the CO2, so raising the CO2, lowering the oxygen, lowering the redox, among other things. So then during the night, we're going to have different water quality, then the pump's going to turn on, and then suddenly everything changes again. So from day to night, the oxygen levels, the redox potential, and the pH and the CO2 levels are going to be fluctuating, which is not ideal. So because this is on more than it's off, it's definitely better than nothing. But what we also need to be aware of is that the marine pure needs to stay wet and oxygenated. So we just need to be aware that if we're going to put the marine pure up there, it's disadvantaged, because if it goes for too long without water flow through it, then a lot of the good bacteria that we're growing up there is going to die. So I'm not sure that I'm going to put the media up there if this has to stay on a timer, which it probably does. So what we probably do then is instead of worrying about the marine fuel being up there, we'll just put the marine fuel around the pump and it will actually work just as well. So we're going to have to look at that. No big problem. But we just need to be aware that bacteria needs consistency of oxygen and flow and so forth, because if your oxygen level falls, you're going to start growing different bacteria. So your nitrifying bacteria is going to die off and your denitrifying bacteria is going to grow. So it's really not ideal if the bacteria is being exposed to different oxygen levels, which as long as we abandon this idea and put the marine fuel around the filter, then I'm just as happy. But these are things we need to consider and these are conversations we need to have, just to make sure that our good bacteria beats our algae.